This is Crystal, aka Sauce.
And this is Tanya, aka Season. Welcome to Sauce and Season, a podcast dedicated to real people to provide real talk and real healing on various topics. We are both wives, moms, entrepreneurs, and business professionals. Our hope is that through these topics and experiences we share, we can gain new insight for ourselves and provide new insights for others. We are excited that you decided to join us as we take this wild roller coaster ride that we call life together and hope that you stick around.
Hey everyone, this is Crystal, aka Sauce. So the topic today is talking about starting over. So of course we've been gone for a long time, and that's because we really had to take time to update some things in our personal lives, get rid of some things in our personal lives, and at the same time revamp what we wanted for Sauce and Season, our vision for it, and where we wanted to go, and really take the time to focus on making it better. Including making sure that we have that consistency that's needed to make it as successful as we want it to be. So as we talk about this topic of starting over, one of the things I want to say is that people are often afraid to stop and just start things over, right? Starting over does not always seem like a good thing for a lot of people. We have to start over in businesses, start over in relationships, start over in endeavors, and, just start over in life in general. And oftentimes people do not like to start over. So my question is really, why do we have such a hard time starting over? What's the reason that people struggle with starting over?
I think it's familiarity. People are comfortable where they are, and sometimes you can get so comfortable that you don't realize that you're not moving. You end up stagnating. But in your comfort zone, you don't have to do too much. You don't have to open yourself up to anything. So in your comfort zone, you are comfortable, right? That's the word. That's the definition. You are comfortable in that place. So starting over is really hard, because especially if you feel like you've already gained perspective. I don't want to start over. I think about Abraham in the Bible. And he had to go out. He had to venture out, venture away. He had to separate from family. The key thing there is he was able to listen to God and know that it was going to be good for him to do that. And I'm sure it wasn't mentioned in the word, but I'm sure there was a struggle with that. He was with family. So change is not always a bad thing. Starting over is not a bad thing. I think it's how we look at it.
No, I agree with that. And it's funny because as I was thinking about starting over and that concept of starting over, what's the alternative, right? What's the alternative if we don't start over? Is it just that we quit altogether? Is it that we just stay in something that maybe is not healthy or workable? If we look at it from the aspect of relationships, oftentimes people don't want to start over. And it's funny because as a therapist, I hear it all the time, especially from women who are either going through a divorce or have gone through a divorce. One of the things that they would tell me is, just not wanting to start over, just that fear of having to do things all over. And it's like, well, what's the alternative? Right. Is it to stay in something that's very toxic, that's unhealthy for you, that you have said repeatedly that there's nothing from it you find joy in or feel like it can recover? Is it that you stay in something? And so that got me to think, while people look at starting over as such a negative thing, they don't think about how you not choosing that option to start over can also cause more harm than good. Right. And so if you don't have another alternative to starting over, then that's probably the best thing that you need to really do is start over and look at it from the best thing that could really happen. And it's funny because as I was thinking about this topic, it made me think that sometimes the best thing we can do for ourselves is to stop and pause. Yeah. And then after we really take a stop and we pause, we have to reevaluate why we was planning on doing something in the first place, reevaluating our vision for something, reevaluating our goals, reevaluating just that topic or that situation in general. And then after we reevaluate, then we have to start over. Yeah. We have to start over. Yeah. You start over with a better vision, a better plan, a better game plan overall for whatever it is that you want to do. So even though we look at starting over as a negative thing, sometimes your best blessings come from starting over. And it's funny because that's how I feel about it. Everything that I've done in my life, there's been plenty of times where I felt bad initially because it's like, I felt like I should have had the game plan at the beginning. But once I realized, okay, you don't have the game plan, so what's your alternative? And my alternative was to start over. I found that I got my best blessings from being able to start something over and doing it again after I really reevaluated, and it was better. So we try to sometimes force things to work. Well, maybe it's not supposed to. Right. Maybe it's not working because it's not supposed to work, or the way that you have it to work is not the plan it's supposed to be. And so what you need to do instead is just start it over.
I think about, we come from a place where we think about change only happens when something's unhealthy or toxic. And as you were speaking, I was thinking about when you are in a place where things are going good and you still have to make a change.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? People really don't. That's something that is a hard thing for a person, because my life is going great. Everything looks perfect. Everything looks fair. And then something comes to push it in a different direction. And then you say, why me? Right? But like you said, change, whether good or bad, can be for your benefit. Let me tell you what I mean by the bad. The Bible tells us that all things work. So all means all, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that means all things work for the good of those who love the Lord and who are called by his name, right? So that tells me that even if it looks like something that's a storm, I have to sit at that moment, like you said, evaluate and say, why did this storm come? What is this storm here to teach me? What lesson must I learn from starting over or the change that is in front of me? I think if we take a perspective and look at it as, what can I do with what is happening? Whether the change seems good or the change seems bad. Sometimes the change may be a letter or an offer to move to a whole nother city to have a job that might be better for you. But if you don't like change, it will be hard to make that decision. Sometimes it's, this car that I have, I might need to change it or downsize it. And for some people, that's a negative. Mm-hmm. But downsizing is better for your income. So I think, like you said, we have to evaluate the change, evaluate the starting over. Because it's always to benefit you, because it'll help you in some way or other. But sometimes that change comes right when you feel like everything is perfect.
No, I agree with that. And, and I do understand the aspect of sometimes we get comfortable, we get complacent. Mm-hmm. And even though we put negative connotations on those words, they're not really fully negative. And I understand that the fact that sometimes we just don't know what that change will look like, right?
Correct.
I've seen that aspect of it as well, where a lot of times people don't want to start over because at least I know the mess I'm in. Even let's look at it from the negative standpoint, right? If I'm in something that's not good, at least I know this mess.
Right.
What happens if I change and go find another mess and I don't know how to deal with that mess? Right. I'm comfortable in this because I know how to deal with it. I know what not to do and what to do to make it work for me. But this new change, starting over, may create a new situation that I'm not familiar with and I'm not comfortable with to deal with. So I understand that aspect. And then from the aspect of when things are going good, we don't want to start over, we don't want change. But in my mind, if things are going as good as you think they are, then there is no need to change it. So if you're brought into a situation where you now have to change something, that means it's not really all good.
That's true.
Something isn't right, because if it was really positive, then why would you need to change? I mean, from the aspect of if we got to downsize because something happened, then that means that something that happened wasn't really something good if it can't maintain that lifestyle or whatever it is that we want to keep as well.
That way, but most people don't look at it that way. Mm-hmm. They may look at it as, I'm driving this vehicle, and whether in their eyes they have to downsize or not, they don't want to give up that thing. Mm-hmm. They don't want to change that issue. Or like I said, for that person that's going to get the new job, right? It doesn't mean that their life here was bad. Mm-hmm. It just means they got a better offer, but they still have a hard time starting over. Mm-hmm. And like you said, I think it goes back to a place of control as well. Because you said that, if somebody's in a bad place and they want to stay there because they know this mess, that means I can control this mess. I can control what happens here. So let's say I'm in a bad relationship where I'm being abused. In my mind, I can prevent the abuse by doing a certain
XYZ.
thing.
Yeah, right. Whatever I know that person doesn't like for me to do. Yeah,
correct.
Definitely.
And rather than thinking of it as, however, if I get out of this, I may not know this mess over here, but I might not be being abused. I may not, that mess might look different, a different mess. But I'm just saying, some people don't think of it that way. They don't look at it as, this is better for you. They look at it as, I don't want to do that. So I think it's like a place of control. I can control my life. I can control what's going on at this moment. If I go next door, I can't control what my neighbor's doing. So,
and I think, change isn't easy. So it's not to say that starting over and change is the easiest thing or the thing that everybody wants to do, because most of the time you don't really want to, like I said, starting over at the beginning. Right. Starting over is not something that everybody looks at as being a positive thing. I mean, in the situation where you brought up the person who's leaving a job, right? They're leaving a job for a better offer, but that's still change, right? So that's still an aspect of, if things was going very great, If that job was giving you what you needed,
you wouldn't
want the better offer. What it could be considered
That's
a better
true.
offer. But I do understand that everybody doesn't look at it in that aspect, and I think they don't look at it in that aspect because change is not easy.
Right.
If it came easy, then it's not worth it. You know that saying that they always say, anything that's worth having, you got to really work for, right? So if it comes easy to you, if it comes natural to you, if it's something that just comes to you, then is it really worth it? If you just walked and got everything that you want, is it worth it? Or is it worth it more when you are getting something that you had to work for, that you had to earn? You're gonna appreciate that thing a lot more. Mm-hmm. So sometimes we need to start over. Sometimes we need to look at the aspect of, you know, what can this change bring? I do think the evaluation stage is the most important though, because during that evaluation stage, you get to dictate the reasoning.
Right.
There are a lot of people, I do feel like, just change things impulsively, and that's not healthy either. Mm-hmm. You know, just to make changes without thinking things through, that's not a good thing to do. But that's why that evaluation stage is so important, because it allows you to really make a decision of why. What is your motive?
Right.
What is this change going to do for you? How is this change going to bring something good for you? So that evaluation stage makes you look at what's the reasoning. And even after you evaluate, the next stage is starting over. But yeah, it's not going to be easy.
Right.
You know, I may know that I need to leave this job because this job is going to offer me more money, and this offering me more money allows me to get the house I want or the car I want, but it doesn't make it easy.
Correct.
And I understand that. But if you're in that evaluation stage, you go through that stage of where you're understanding what is the reasoning you're doing it.
Yeah.
Right. So you cannot choose that great job offer. If you like the job that you at, you cannot choose it. But then that means you also have to get to a stage where you evaluate the fact that means you're not going to get that house or get that thing that you want because of where their income where your income is with that job. And if you're okay with that, then you don't need to have no change.
Right.
That the change is going to be more in your mindset to accept where you are.
Right.
So I think when you evaluate, you're making that decision of what is your reasoning, what is your motive. But I think a lot of people look at change and starting over as such a bad thing that they keep themselves in a situation that's not good for them.
Yeah.
And that's the negative thing. When you keep yourself in a situation that you know is not right because you're afraid to start over, you got to question that about yourself.
Yeah.
What is the reasoning you're doing that? What is the reasoning for that piece? Because that's not better. Just because you're comfortable
doesn't make it better.
Doesn't make it good. I could be comfortable in something all day long, but I know it's not good for me.
Right.
And if it's not good for you, if it's not causing you to be a better person, challenging you to be better in some way, then that comfortability is not really a positive thing either.
Right. It's what you're saying to me sounds like mindset.
Oh, for sure.
You know, the Bible talks about us changing our mindset, the way we think about things, the way we look at things. It's a mind shift. You know, your thoughts have to shift when you're ready to make a change. You can't think the same way. You know, your old man really does have to be put aside. I think about recently we started fasting, and I noticed that there's been some shifts in my life, but it's my mindset that's shifted. The things on the outside haven't changed, right? But my mind, my thoughts have changed, so I'm starting over in certain areas, but my mindset has changed towards the start over or towards the change. So, you know, it's a mindset change.
For sure. It has to, the change is an overall change.
Yeah.
So, you know, the mind is the temple. It's the part of your body, right? We look at the heart as being a lot of things, but the heart is the emotions. The mind is really where you got to challenge yourself, because everything starts from your mind. When I talk to my clients about their thought process, we talk about cognitive distortions and how those cognitive distortions can force them to miss things or to put themselves in a situation that's not healthy. And everybody, including me as a therapist, have cognitive distortions, because a thought is anything that pops into your head. It can be positive, it can be negative, it can be helpful, it can be unhelpful, it can be truthful, it can be false, it can be accurate, inaccurate, it can be real, it can be imaginary. A thought is just anything that pops into your head. And so we all have thoughts that pop into our head, some that may be negative. The difference is, are we ruminating on it? Are we focusing on that negative thought? Are we sitting there breathing, thinking, doing all of these different things with it? The thought itself is not bad. It's the stuff that you do after that initial thought that's really bad. And that's the part that you have to really look at. And so, you know, it's funny because if you don't control your mind, how can you control anything else? I often tell my clients, you know, your thoughts dictate how you feel. And then how you feel dictates what you do. Right. And then what you do is going to create another thought. And then that thought is going to create another feeling and then another behavior. And it can keep going and going and going. Cycle. And it can keep going in a negative way or a positive way, depending on how you decide to interrupt it. Right. And so, yes, when you are talking about starting over, when you were talking about change, and when I talk to a lot of my clients, we do focus on the cognitive distortions in their thought process, what they think about. What is the reasoning you don't want to make the change?
Right.
And if the change is because of comfortability, the situation you talked about earlier with domestic violence, a lot of that with a lot of people, it's because they feel stuck. Yeah. Once again, either I know this person. I don't know what I may go out in the world, or, this person controls all the finances. So how am I going to have money to go leave? Or this person has the home in their name. So how am I going to find a place? Or what if this person finds me? So all of that is your thoughts.
Yeah.
All that's what they're thinking about. And those thoughts will overwhelm them to the point that they choose not to leave because in some way it's better.
Right.
Even though they know and we know it's not better because of the situation, it's like, it makes more sense. They tap into the more of the rational side of things. Logic. And it's like, baby, we need you to tap into that wise mind. The rational mind will just keep you stuck because you're looking at it as being one way or this way. Right. That emotional mind will keep you all over the place. But you need the wise mind where you kind of bridge both of them, where you can really think things through and make a decision not based on just your emotions or that logic, but both of them together. Yeah. And so you're right. The thoughts can really dictate if you do decide to make a change for the better for your life. But I think one of the things as we talk about challenging people's thoughts is challenging them to look at what's your reasoning for starting over.
Right.
And I tell people all the time, if you're conflicted, then that's something that you should look at. Because if you're so conflicted on a situation, that means there's a change that you are either trying to fight, right, or it's that change that you try to think about is not a right change, and you still, either way, still try to fight it. So that's where you still have to look at what's your motive, what's your reasoning, why is it that you want to start over?
Right. I definitely agree with that. Like you said, it all starts with that evaluation piece, that piece of knowing why. What is your why? Where's your why going to take you? And what is your why going to produce? So I do believe that that you were saying something a little bit earlier when you were talking. One of the things I thought about was hope. So, some of the things that we have to do, we focus on the faith of it. But how can we have faith when we don't even have hope? And so sometimes we have to find our hope in the change. So find where that change is taking us to have hope and live by faith that change will be better for us. And I think some people lose that. I know there was a season where I went through that, where I felt like I was getting too old to accomplish certain things. So for me, it was, your kids can accomplish that. Your season is out. You're out to pasture. I literally put myself out to pasture. So my thought process took me away from the things that I could do because I took myself out of circulation. Because in my mind, I was too old. So I didn't allow myself to make changes. So I literally stagnated myself and would not allow myself to change. I would not allow, and I'm not talking about changing in my personality or in my emotions or in things I was doing, but change in my life. Because I'm too old to do that, right? I'm too old to think about buying a new house. Because by the time I get a certain age, I would think my way out of it. So I would think my way out of the change. Because by the time I get 62, I'm ready to go on to pasture.
Oh God!
and so therefore, right. So why buy a house at 40, right? Because I'm only gonna have 20 more years. So that's how I was thinking, and I realized I had to start changing that. Why go pick up a new career? You already 40 this, you know what I mean? No numbers attached. You're 40 this, so you're already gonna be, it doesn't make sense. Stay where you at, live it out, and be okay with it. So I think a lot of times we think our way out of it. We don't have hope in the fact that this thing will be different for us, and so therefore we don't put our faith behind it.
No, I agree. And hope is something to where I think it goes back to even as we talk about what's your motive, right? And you think things through, and then you think about your thought process, and you throw in the hope piece with it. Hope is something that you don't see. It's like, that faith portion, right? Like you talked about faith. You don't always see it. Yeah. You don't always know what it's going to look like. And I think with hope, there's a piece of you that has to just trust the situation. Right. Or trust that change that you're trying to do is going to bring forth some type of good. But I think in those cases, for people who don't have hope, it's because things have not turned out the way that they wanted it to turn out before. If you are the type of person that when something has happened, you've had hope and there's been a positive result, you're more likely to have hope again.
Going with that, right?
But when you are a person that you've prayed or you've wished or hoped for something to come to pass, and every single time it doesn't, then of course by the time I get to that fourth situation, I'm not gonna have no hope, because it's like I had hope those last times and it didn't happen. And it's not to say that's the positive way to look at it, but that I can honestly say I think that's how a lot of people feel, which makes it harder for them to have hope. But that goes back to even what they're thinking about, right? Because my thought process may be playing a part of me not having hope is, well, me having hope didn't work last time. That's a thought.
Yeah, that's true.
That's something I'm thinking about. So I do agree. I think people have to have more hope for knowing that the route that they're taking is a reason. But I think a lot of people, especially these types of people that we're with nowadays, it's all about what I'm going to get out of it.
Right.
We want everything now. We want to know how it's going to turn out. And that's not always reality.
Yeah.
We may not always know that us making this change is going to bring forth something good.
Correct.
We may not always know that me doing this one thing is going to create a different situation.
Right.
But does that mean I don't grow or try it?
Right.
You still have to try new things. You still have to make that step. Even though we may not know what it's going to bring, what's the alternative? That's been the mindset, honestly, that I've been in.
Right.
Like, what's the alternative? Do I stay in something that I'm not happy with, or I don't like, or I don't feel joy, or that I dread every day? And that could be in any type of situation for anybody. For some people, it may be a relationship. For some people, it may be a job. For some people, it may be a family. Right. It may be anything.
Right.
What's the alternative? Do you stay in it?
Right.
Or do you make the change?
Right.
And just see where that takes you?
Right. I think part of that, too, goes to fear.
Mm-hmm.
Fear will make you afraid to make a change. Everything that we're talking about right now, mindset, shifting, different things, some of those things are trapped in fear.
Mm-hmm.
Because you start hearing that little voice say that if you do this, this will happen. And it's not always pointing out something good that will happen.
Mm-hmm.
It may be pointing out if you do this, that will happen. And that thing seems bad. It goes to fear.
Mm-hmm.
That is fear. And fear is something that we can't participate with, because fear is really false evidence appearing real, which means we don't even know what's going to happen, but we didn't put all kind of strength behind the negative. Something recently happened in our family that I had to get myself together, because I find that my thoughts shift negative real quick. And so to help myself not do that, I stay away from certain things. What I'm reading, what I'm listening to, the music I'm listening to, the news that I'm watching, because we're living in a changed society now, right? Before, when we had first started doing Sauce and Season, we were in a different place.
Oh, for sure.
So I think about us with starting over. After COVID, this is post-pandemic. Pandemic still happening in many ways, but we've come through so much of it. We can call this the shock waves now. We're living in the shock wave part of COVID. And how have things changed? We have to evaluate how our lives has changed. My life is different than it was before. I don't believe act the same way that I did before COVID.
No,
right?
I agree.
Very cautious, very careful. And so with those things, and that's not just because of COVID. We think about recent elections, the uprising of different things in America. I'm cautious about places I go now. I'm cautious about being out at a certain time of night now. So those types of things, I'm not as comfortable as I used to be in certain places. Those types of things have made a change for me. Now I have to think, are those things negative or positive? But either way, it has made a change, and I have to look at what those changes have done to me. I do realize that after a post-pandemic, I've become a little bit more negative. So some of it is not caution, some of it is negativity, just straight out. And so I'm working on my mindset. Because where before my faith was fueled by the energy of, what I thought, how I acted, who I was, and where I placed my faith in Christ. But I realized that faith was tested. Now, have I left my faith? No. But I'm watching where it wasn't strong or bulletproof. And it probably will never be bulletproof. But not to dwell in that place of fear and negativity.
No, that's true. And fear is a major portion of a lot of the things that stops us from starting over.
Yeah.
I'm afraid of, what is it going to look like? I'm afraid of, what if I fail?
Right.
I'm afraid of, what if I succeed? For, those people who are afraid of success. I'm afraid of my thoughts about it. I'm afraid of how other people may look at me. I'm afraid of this, that, X, Y, Z. And that's so true. Fear will stop us from doing so much stuff. But just because you're afraid of something does not mean you stop yourself from taking those steps.
Correct.
Because then it's going to be the shoulda, coulda, woulda down the line. I use my fear as a reason to stop me from doing something. And then 10 years down the line, it's going to be, well, I wish I would have known what it was like.
Right.
It's better, in my mindset, I can't speak for everybody. For me, it's better to have taken the risk and failed at it and know it's not for me
at all.
Than not take the risk at all. And then 10 years down the line, wishing I took that risk.
Correct.
And I think fear stops us from doing so much. And it comes from something.
Right.
There's something that we've either seen, heard, been taught, learned overall.
Right.
That tells us that staying in that place of fear is better.
Right.
I appreciate and I love the people that take risks. I've never really been a risk taker. Probably never will, in all transparency. But there are some areas of my life where I'm more likely to step out.
Right.
I don't consider it a risk because I am more of a rational person. I'm going to think it through and I'm going to weigh my options and I'm going to see what's best for me. But I admire those people that step out and just believe or just, can be so free-spirited. Honestly, it's like my husband. My husband is very just gone with the wind. And he could just take risks or just, do things. And sometimes I look at him side-eye because I'm like, I wish I was like that. But I understand at the same time, we both can't be that way.
Right.
Because if we both was like that, who knows how our household would be. And we probably be caught up in some things we don't need to be caught up in.
Right.
But nonetheless, I admire his spirit because he's able to just take risk and just do things. Right. And that's a good place to be in. But then I think sometimes he looks at me and he wishes he was my way in some way.
Right.
That he made decisions based on thinking it through. So it's funny, but I say all that to say, it's okay to be both sides. But you cannot allow fear to be the main thing that stops you either way you go.
Correct. And I think, too, you got to think about it, too. Y'all both had different experiences. I remember when I was younger, I was free-spirited. I remember your dad one time telling me, one day you're going to strike it rich because you always trying stuff. And then I had tried so much and beat down so often with the different things I tried that I just stopped trying. It was like, okay, I'm going to get logical now. Now I'm going to think everything through. But then what is that thing called? It's not so much a fear, but it's trapped in fear. It's a thing that there's a logical term they have out there. And it's like, you don't want to, not fear failure. It's not that one, but it's almost like you think so much that you never make a move. I can't remember the name of it, and maybe on the next episode I'll get back to that. But it's one where, you think, you overthink it. You think. So we're going to say right now is overthinking. You think so much that you never make a move, right? And that's just too much. And sometimes, I'm not going to say sometimes, most times that's not logic, but fear. Because I've thought so much that I talked myself out of it. Because I've looked at every negative thing, but nothing about it that's good. Or I say those good things they outweigh the bad. And with that being said, I don't even make a move. When we were going through starting to practice, and we started a practice, everyone, during COVID. When we were going through starting to practice, that was one of the things I almost did. Just think, okay, this can't work or that can't work. And I think just recently, even your dad had said to me, he said, think about it, a year ago or so, almost 2 years now.
Almost 2 years, yeah.
A year ago or so, you were thinking and wondering if you could afford the space that you all were going to rent. And he was like, I haven't heard y'all complain once about the space, nor the rent. So,
if anything, the space.
Right. We need more, right? But here's the thing. If we would not have made the change, but I could have shipwrecked us.
I was going to say,
so it is I. Because I could have shipwrecked us and said, no, we're not going to make that move. We're just going to stay where we are in this temporary space. We don't have to pay a rent here, and we can use that temporary space. Then what will we do? Right? I'd still be doing only mobile therapy, right? And the counselors would have no place to counsel their people. It would all be teletherapy. Because I know y'all weren't going to do mobile. So it would be teletherapy. So we got to think about that.
So in that situation, what made you pull the trigger as far as taking that risk? Because, in that situation, as you were saying, you were the one that was more so in that place of fear. Me, I was just like, I know it's the next step. I feel it. I see it. I'm looking at the books and I'm saying, we are going to need space, or I'm seeing where we are getting calls left and right for people and clientele. So what was it for you that made you finally say yes?
Part of it were the people in my circle, you, your dad. I was living off of your faith. I lived off of daddy's faith. I lived off of your faith, you know. And then I just started telling myself, it's either going to be go or stop. So at what point are you going to go ahead and just do it? And I think it was Joyce Myers that said, do it afraid. And I think during that season, and even now with all the things that's going on in my life personally, one of the things that I keep hearing in my spirit is do it afraid. Do it afraid, wrap it up, put it in a ball, and give it to God. So I've literally started doing that physically. So that means I take my hand sometimes while I'm praying, and everything I'm praying about, I put it in this imaginary ball in my hand. And when I finish praying, before I say amen, I wrap the ball up and I toss the ball away and I say amen. Because I take it and throw it away. I'm putting it in God's hands. And every time it comes back up, I do the same thing. Wrap it up, throw it away. Amen. So it might not be physically here, but I take what I'm thinking about, put it in a ball, and I give it to God. So during that season, I had to do that a lot. I'm still doing that as we grow, because there's other things that I have to get past now in our operation and daily growth as a business and as a person, as a family, you know, because our family has changed. I mean, there's so many changes that have happened since COVID, since elections, since this, that, and the next thing that, you know, we're working through.
No, I agree, you know, and I think that I love that piece of just do it afraid, because like I said earlier, you're never going to fully feel comfortable with change. I think human nature, we don't feel comfortable with change.
Right.
Because we look at change as being such a negative thing that sometimes we are going to have to just step out on faith and do it in that fear and know that it may not feel good until we actually taken that risk and to do it in the first place. Because why? We're breaking that comfortability.
Right.
Whatever we was doing before, we was comfortable, we was used to it. So now I got to change something and I don't know how to deal with it and experience it. Of course I'm going to be afraid. So I love that concept of just, sometimes you're just going to have to do it afraid.
Yeah.
And so it's funny because as we talked about starting over, one of the things that we decided to start for Sauce and Season is a What's Happening segment, where we kind of talk about what's going on in today's world in conjunction with whatever topic that we have. And it's funny because as we was thinking about starting over as being our topic for our first episode back, because we have really started over and came back, it's so many things that have happened recently that falls into this topic, but looking at the aspect of the relationships and starting over. I don't know if a lot of y'all are familiar with Jenny Mai and Jeezy, or even Keisha Knight Pullum and Brad James. And those are two people, in some way, they had to start over in their relationships, two couples, right? It's funny, I don't know how you feel about it, but, and backstory, you know, for Jenny Mai, she was married previously, and she, her husband divorced, and it came out because of, you know, him wanting a baby, her not wanting a baby. But now she's married Jeezy, which she said she never would do was get remarried. Now she's married him, and they're expecting. And she was married previously for 10 years and never had a baby.
Right.
And, you know, and then with Keisha Knight Pullum, her previous husband, they was married for a short period of time, and allegedly with some infidelity on his part, and they broke up. And now she's found Brad James not too long after, and they remarried. And if we look at that, I'm pretty confident those two women that probably didn't really want to start over.
Right.
That was afraid probably to start over, had backlash and everything.
Maybe
you know?
even the men too.
Oh,
we don't
for
know,
sure.
You know?
For sure. But, you know, those are two couples that started over. How do you feel about that?
Well, I know the backstory for both of them. I would say with the Jenny Mai situation, I think you have to be, you know, I don't know her, don't know him.
For sure. We don't know
But
him.
I do know that, you know, people have to be comfortable. And there's something about this relationship that makes her comfortable enough to say, I want to move forward and have a child. Right. And so I believe that, you know, there was a lot of backlash, a lot of people talking about the fact that, you know, she's doing it now. Why didn't she do it then? But I think people have to be careful. You don't know that woman's history. You don't know what she really went through in that previous relationship. And you don't know what her relationship is now. I think one of the things, even Keisha Knight Pullum, you know, and her new husband, I think a lot of times, and this is where changes happen. This is really good. When I was growing up, there was no social media. So what I did in my home stayed in my home, unless someone in my home went out and talked about it, right? So now you have people living their lives in front of social media. So people think that because it's in social media, you have a right to discuss it. No, you do not. And that's how I feel about it. I think people need to understand that what's going on in their lives, their change, people change.
Mm-hmm.
Situations change. I said it earlier. The difference between you and your husband is experiences. So where he is free spirited is because of his experiences. Where you're more logical is because of your experiences. So their experiences in both of these relationships that you spoke of is what made the difference for them. Whether they did it previously or what they're doing now, it was what they were experiencing at that moment that made a difference. And nobody has a right to talk about it. Yeah. I mean, yeah, you feel like, oh, they're social media, so they put their lives out there. That's fine. But where do you respect? When do you cross the line? Where do you say, oh, that's not my business? And that's how I feel about it.
I think that's not my business no more with the world that we live in and everything.
True. That's that change.
On the other side of things, that even though you feel that way on the other side, people are like, well, they're putting it out there. If you put it out there, then aren't you giving me a green light to be in your life? But I think in the situation with Jenny Ma, I actually recently saw a video where she was actually speaking, and she was saying that part of her fear with pregnancy was all that she went through in her life. She was concerned, was she going to be able to keep her baby safe? Mm-hmm. So in her mind, it was just easier not to have a baby.
Right.
But then, once again, people talk and they say, well, what makes it different now? And in some way, it's a little bit worse, right? Because now what people are saying is, you are married to a black man, which means your baby gonna also have some black. So aren't you a little bit more fearful now that you're creating a black baby in the world that we live in? So some people are kind of like, her logic doesn't make sense because of that reason. And I'm not saying her logic makes sense, doesn't make sense, whatever. That's her life. Business, right? I do agree with what you said as far as sometimes a change in a person will make you see differently. And
maybe she feels safe with him.
It's not to say she didn't feel safe with her previous husband. It's to say a new person may make you think about things in a different aspect,
different light
than you probably would. But I look at it to say, what if she would have stayed in that relationship with that person, with her husband, that did want a baby? You know what I'm saying? What happens in that situation? Mm-hmm. They both had to make a decision, even though how he went about it, we could say was right, wasn't right, whatever. And it's allegedly, allegedly is our word. But, the fact that they both decided we're going to go our separate ways, it brought forth a change.
Yeah.
It brought forth a change. Whether you look at it as good or bad, it brought forth a change. And in her situation, it was good for her. Mm-hmm. In Keisha Knight's Pullum situation, her change was good for her.
Right.
Because she got a lot of backlash on, well, why didn't you take him back? Why didn't you make it work? Because y'all was only married for a short period of time and X, Y, Z. And,
again,
even with feeling like she rushed into that marriage in the first place. It's like all this saying that with her. And what if she would have listened or probably stayed there? Would she have found her person for her?
I think it's important something, you asked me about the business and why did I go ahead and pull the trigger. Your counsel. Who's around you, who's in your ear, and who's counseling you. And I feel like both these situations, it depended on probably a lot on their counsel at the time. The people in your lives. Because you can have those who seem like they're there to help, and they're really not there to help. Because they don't really want to see your change in a positive light, And then you can have those that's there and they're giving you negative, feedback. So I think we have to be careful who's counseling us too in the midst of those decision making. And sometimes you can't tell everybody. Mm-hmm. We don't know who both of these women and both of these men were listening to at that time, right? So now they found communication. You don't know what's changed, I just think it's so important to have the right counsel, the right circle around you when you're making some decisions, when you're deciding to make change, because I would not have pulled the trigger if it wasn't for things you and Daddy said to me. I probably would have just not done it, been comfortable just saying, okay. A lot of people tell me a lot of times, you never want to get to that place where you should say shoulda, coulda, woulda. Mm-hmm. And I'm not big on that either. I'm not one of those people that harp on those shoulda, coulda, wouldas. So for me, I can become very complacent if I'm not careful because I can go left or right with it. So I think it's your counsel is very important. And so for both of those women, both of those relationships, I wish them nothing but the best. And we have to learn how to block out negativity because like I said, because they're putting it out there, people are going to think they have a right. And because society has changed, people think they have a right. Mm-hmm. So at the end of the day, they have to do what makes them happy.
I agree with you because we putting this out here and people probably going to feel like they have a right to say whatever they want to say.
And
too,
that's
so
fine.
That's definitely true, right?
That's true. Fine. That's your right. But my right is to not listen to what you have to say if I choose not to.
Mm-hmm. But I agree. Counsel, the people that you look at, the people that you talk to, the people you allow to talk into your life is also going to make a difference.
Correct.
So I think out of everything that we talked about with starting over, the biggest things that we really mentioned was fear, our thought process, the counsel that you receive,
Yep.
you know, the evaluation stage that you go through. And I think my biggest recommendation for people is if you are in a state of confusion where you're not sure what to do in your life, then that is a stage of evaluation for yourself.
Yep.
That is a stage for you to sit there, pause, and to evaluate your why, evaluate your motive, evaluate your reasoning, evaluate your alternatives. Because
Right.
sometimes it may not be a change, maybe it's something minute you need to do.
Right.
Right? So you evaluate those alternatives as well. But if all the alternatives comes back to the only solution being to start over,
Right.
then that means it's the next best step. And you have to look at that piece as well and say, okay, what do I need to do to get to that stage? Is it changing my thought process at that moment? Is it working on whatever is causing the fear? Because the fear is coming from a place of something. So what's causing that fear?
Right.
So I think when it comes to change, we got to stop looking at it as being a bad thing, because sometimes your best things blossom and change. I look at the season that we're in with fall.
Right. It's beautiful.
Right? If we didn't go through the season of fall, how could we go through the season of spring?
That's true.
Right, sometime in summer and all these different things, but you know, the flowers,
Winter.
they fall, they change, they
Right.
look, they shrivel up, they do all these things, but then in the end, they
That's
blossom
good.
into something so beautiful, and they had
That's
to
real
go
good.
through a change. I look at the butterfly. The butterfly doesn't start off as a butterfly. It had to go through a state of change
Metamorphosis.
to get to where it is to be beautiful.
And then be cocooned. Means that you're inside of your own, you're left with your own thoughts in this chrysalis for how many months before you start to bust out, and nobody should help you break out of it, because then you have
you cripple.
Right, exactly. So we have to go through it on our own. I know for me, and you're speaking, I was thinking about me, and I know everybody that listens to us is not a believer, but I am. So one of the things that I use, and if you are a believer, is I use Christ as my sieve. So for every change I'm about to make, for every metamorphosis I'm going through, I use him as my weight. And so I weigh it on him. I weigh it on the word that he said to me. I weigh it on the time that I spend with him. And so that's one of the things I want to add for those that are believers. And even if you're not, maybe you can find him through these situations, you know. But that's my sieve. That's where I weigh what I'm going through.
And for those who are not believers, you know, find yours. Find what works for you as well, that keeps you tethered, that keeps you going and moving.
And that's it, people. We are so glad that we came back. We hope that you're glad we're back.
Yes.
We're glad that we have you here as support. And we hope to be more consistent and continue with this and bring new topics and new inspiration every time we sit before you.
And if you have any topic ideas or things that you want to do or want us to talk about, you know, definitely share it with us, you know, and comment and let us know. We will be pleased to hear what you all may want us to talk about as well. So we thank you for listening in and appreciate you and hope that you come back again the next time.
Have a nice day.
Bye, everybody. So we want to thank you for listening in today and want to encourage you to go and like our Facebook page and Instagram page, Sauce and Season, if you haven't already. Also, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, like, comment, share, and turn on your notifications to know when we have released another video or have gone live. We hope that you were blessed in some way with today's podcast and hope that you join us again for our next podcast. Thank you and have a blessed day.